The Spy Who Loved Me might be the ultimate Bond masterpiece, but the real story behind its cast is darker than the film itself. Hidden struggles, painful losses, and lives that took unexpected turns over the years. Here's where they are now. Number 1. Desmond Llewelyn as Q. To begin with, we turn to Desmond Llewelyn, who played Q, the brilliant inventor and trusted quartermaster behind James Bond's legendary gadgets. He was 63 years old when he had already become essential to the identity and success of the Bond franchise. And by this stage, Q wasn't just a supporting role. He was the quiet force that held the entire mission together. Sadly, in 1999, Desmond Llewelyn passed away at the age of 85 on December 19th after a tragic head-on car crash in East Sussex while driving home from a book signing. The injuries were severe, and he died shortly after being airlifted to the hospital. His funeral was held on January 6, 2000, with Roger Moore himself delivering a heartfelt tribute, followed by a private cremation. His ashes were returned to his family, closing the chapter of a man who had quietly shaped over 3 decades of cinema. But behind that calm, witty figure on screen was a man haunted by war. During World War II, Llewelyn was captured by German forces and spent 5 brutal years as a prisoner of war, even attempting escape before being transferred to the infamous Colditz Castle. And here's the irony that shocks most fans. The man who played the genius inventor Q admitted he was completely clueless about technology in real life, often struggling with props and being corrected on set. Yet somehow that vulnerability made his performance even more human, more real. He remained devoted to his craft and his wife Pamela for over 60 years, building a quiet life away from fame. But his ending was as sudden as it was heartbreaking. Just weeks after appearing in The World Is Not Enough, where Q hinted at retirement, life delivered its final twist. With an estimated net worth of around $5 million, Desmond Llewelyn left behind not just a legacy, but a character that no one has ever truly replaced. Number 2. Lois Maxwell as Miss Moneypenny. Now we move to Lois Maxwell, who played Miss Moneypenny, the loyal secretary, confidant, and emotional anchor within MI6. She was 50 years old when she had already defined her career and brought a rare human warmth to the Bond universe. Every scene with Moneypenny added a sense of familiarity and warmth, something the series could never truly replace. Lois Maxwell passed away on September 29, 2007, at the age of 80 after battling colorectal cancer. She spent her final years in Perth, Australia, living with her son after undergoing surgery in 2001. Her death came quietly, marking the end of an era for Bond fans. But her life was far from glamorous behind the scenes. At just 15 years old, she ran away from home and lied about her age to join the Canadian Women's Army Corps during World War II. Later, despite becoming a Bond icon, she struggled financially for years. When her husband suffered a severe heart attack and could no longer work, Maxwell was forced to carry the entire family alone, writing newspaper columns, working in business, doing whatever it took to survive. Fame didn't protect her. It never did. And perhaps the most heartbreaking part came at the end. Despite her legendary status, she was quietly replaced in the Bond series without the send-off she deserved, something that deeply disappointed her. In her later years, she battled cancer largely out of the public eye, living in isolation in Australia. With an estimated net worth of around $2 million, Lois Maxwell's story is a painful reminder that even the most recognizable faces can fade away quietly, leaving behind memories far louder than their final days. Number 3. Bernard Lee as M. Next, we turn to Bernard Lee, who played M, the commanding head of MI6, the authority figure who grounded every mission and gave Bond his direction. He was 69 years old when he served as the steady force that kept the entire story anchored. His portrayal added a sense of control and realism, making Bond's world feel grounded and disciplined. Bernard Lee passed away on January 16, 1981, at the age of 73, after a painful battle with stomach cancer at the Royal Free Hospital in London. His death came at a devastating time, right as For Your Eyes Only was about to begin filming, forcing producers to rewrite the script because no one could replace him. He was cremated at Golders Green Crematorium. But behind that commanding voice and calm authority was a life shattered by tragedy. In 1972, his wife died in a horrific house fire, and Lee himself barely escaped with his life. What followed was even darker. He was later violently attacked and robbed, spiraling into deep depression and turning to alcohol as a way to cope. For a time, he lost work, lost direction, and nearly lost himself completely. Then came a moment few people know. Actor Richard Burton quietly stepped in and gave him money to help him recover, pulling him back from the edge. Lee eventually returned to acting, reclaiming his dignity on screen. But the damage had already taken its toll. With an estimated net worth of around $1.5 million, Bernard Lee's life was a haunting contrast. On screen, he was power and control. But off-screen, he was a man fighting battles no one could see. Number 4, Roger Moore as James Bond. And now we arrive at Roger Moore, who played James Bond, the charming, suave, and confident secret agent, the very face of the franchise and the man who carried its global appeal. He was 49 years old when he drove the story forward as the symbol of style, danger, and charisma. At that moment, Moore wasn't just part of the film. He was the film. Roger Moore passed away on May 23, 2017, at the age of 89, surrounded by his family at his home in Switzerland after battling lung and liver cancer. He was laid to rest in Monaco Cemetery, with a simple but touching inscription honoring him as a loving father and husband. But behind the elegance and charm was a life filled with chaos and pain. Few people realize that Moore was once a victim of domestic abuse. His second wife, Dorothy Squires, reportedly smashed a guitar over his head, and their relationship spiraled into years of legal battles and emotional turmoil. Their divorce dragged on painfully, exposing a side of his life that sharply contrasted with his polished on-screen image. And the struggles didn't stop there. Moore battled multiple illnesses throughout his life, including prostate cancer, diabetes, and eventually the cancers that would take his life. In a shocking twist, the man who played the world's most fearless spy admitted he had a real fear of guns. Yet despite everything, he endured, building a remarkable career and legacy. With an estimated net worth of around $110 million, Roger Moore left behind more than wealth. He left behind a legend shaped as much by pain as by success. Number 5, Walter Gotell as General Gogol. Moving on, we come to Walter Gotell, who played General Gogol, the calculating head of the KGB, a cold strategist who gradually shifted from enemy to uneasy ally in Bond's world. He was 53 years old when he captured the tension of a world caught between rivalry and reluctant understanding. His performance added a layer of political nuance, showing how even adversaries could evolve as the stakes changed. Walter Gotell passed away on May 5, 1997, at the age of 73 after a battle with cancer. His death came quietly, marking a subdued end to a long and steady career. But his life had always been shaped by struggle. Born into a Jewish family in Germany, Gotell was forced to flee the country in 1938 as the Nazi regime rose to power. Ironically, in the years that followed, he found himself repeatedly cast as the very figures he had escaped: Nazi officers and cold Soviet agents. This typecasting trapped him in a narrow lane, limiting his opportunities and quietly holding back what could have been a far more diverse career. And yet, he endured. He built a steady presence in major films like The Guns of Navarone and The Boys from Brazil, while also investing in business ventures outside acting to secure his future. Still, his passing remained almost unnoticed by the wider world. With an estimated net worth of around $3 million, Walter Gotell's story is a quiet, haunting reminder that not every legacy is celebrated loudly. Some simply fade into history. Number 6. Geoffrey Keane as Frederick Grey. Now we turn to Geoffrey Keane, who played Sir Frederick Grey, the sharp, authoritative British defense minister who represented government power behind the scenes. He was 61 years old when he served as the political voice that added realism and weight to the Bond storyline. By that point, Grey was part of the machinery that made Bond's missions possible. Geoffrey Keane passed away on November 3, 2005, at the age of 89 in London. He spent his final years quietly, away from the spotlight, after retiring from acting in the early 1990s. But behind his composed on-screen presence was a man constantly trying to prove himself. As the son of actor Malcolm Keane, he lived much of his life under the shadow of his father's reputation. That pressure pushed him to work relentlessly, appearing in over 100 films and taking on role after role just to establish his own identity in the industry. And yet, despite his consistency, he was rarely the star. He became known as the reliable figure, the minister, the officer, the authority, but never the spotlight name. Even so, he left his mark in films like Dr. Zhivago and Cromwell, building a career based on endurance rather than fame. With an estimated net worth of around $2 million, Geoffrey Keane's legacy is not one of loud recognition, but of quiet persistence that never truly faded. Number 7. Richard Kiel as Jaws. Next, we turn to Richard Kiel, who played Jaws, the towering, silent enforcer with steel teeth, a presence so intimidating it reshaped what a Bond villain could be. He was 38 years old when he turned a supporting character into one of the most talked-about figures in the entire film. His sheer physicality alone changed the tone of every scene he entered, making audiences both terrified and strangely fascinated. Richard Kiel passed away on September 10, 2014, at the age of 74 from heart disease, just 3 days before his 75th birthday. His final years were spent largely out of public view after a long period of declining health. But the reality behind that towering figure was far more painful than most people realize. His extraordinary height, over 7 feet, was caused by a hormonal condition. And while it made him unforgettable, it also came with constant physical suffering. Chronic back pain followed him for decades, limiting his mobility and comfort. Even more shocking, the metal teeth that defined his character were so uncomfortable and nauseating that he could only wear them briefly, enduring real pain just to create those iconic moments. His career after Bond proved he had more range than people expected. He appeared in films like The Longest Yard, Silver Streak, and later surprised audiences with his role in Happy Gilmore, showing a softer, more humorous side. But life dealt him another cruel blow in 1992, when a car accident severely damaged his balance, forcing him to rely on a wheelchair for much of his later life. That moment didn't just affect his body. It quietly closed the door on the kind of roles he could take on. Still, he adapted. He stepped away from the spotlight, focused on his family, and found strength in his faith after overcoming alcoholism. With an estimated net worth of around $1 million, Richard Kiel's story is not just about a giant on screen. It's about a man who carried immense physical and emotional weight long after the cameras stopped rolling. Number 8. Kurt Jürgens as Stromberg. And now we arrive at Kurt Jürgens, who played Stromberg, the cold, calculating mastermind, a man driven by a radical vision to rebuild civilization beneath the ocean. He was 61 years old when he delivered a performance built on quiet control and unsettling confidence. His portrayal really came from a chilling sense of certainty. Kurt Jürgens passed away on June 18, 1982, at the age of 66, after suffering multiple organ failure linked to years of heavy drinking and smoking. His death came suddenly, cutting short a life that had always moved at an intense pace. He was buried at Vienna Central Cemetery in a grave of honor, where thousands gathered, and even the Austrian Air Force flew overhead in tribute. But long before the fame, his life had already been marked by danger and defiance. During World War II, Jürgens openly opposed the Nazi regime, a stance that led to him being labeled politically unreliable and sent to a forced labor camp. It was a brutal turning point. He managed to escape and survive, but the experience left a lasting imprint on his life and personality. After the war, he rose rapidly, becoming an international star with films like The Enemy Below, gaining recognition across both European and Hollywood cinema. Yet off-screen, his life was anything but stable. He married 5 times, had numerous affairs, and became known for a lifestyle filled with excess. Fame brought him attention, but it also fed habits that slowly began to erode his health and relationships. As the years passed, the consequences became unavoidable. His body began to fail under the strain of years of indulgence, and the man who once commanded the screen found himself facing a quiet decline. With an estimated net worth of around $5 million, Kurt Jürgens left behind a legacy that feels almost cinematic in itself. Brilliant, chaotic, and ultimately shaped by the very intensity that made him unforgettable. Number 9. George Baker, as Captain Benson. We continue with George Baker, who played Captain Benson, the composed naval officer who helped guide Bond through one of the film's most dangerous operations at sea. He was 46 years old when his presence brought a sense of discipline and quiet authority to the mission. At that point in his journey, this role reflected a career already shaped by years of steady, understated performances. George Baker passed away at the age of 80 on October 7th, 2011, following a stroke and a severe case of pneumonia. His final years were marked by declining health, and his death was both sudden and deeply felt within British television circles. He was laid to rest after a long life surrounded by family, leaving behind 5 daughters and a legacy built more on consistency than fame. Long before that, his life had taken a path filled with promise. Born in Bulgaria to an English father and Irish mother, Baker rose quickly in the 1950s, starring in films like The Dam Busters and The Ship That Died of Shame. For a moment, it seemed inevitable that he would become one of Britain's leading men. Yet somehow that breakthrough never fully happened. What makes his story quietly tragic is how close he came to becoming James Bond himself. Ian Fleming reportedly considered him the ideal choice, but timing and prior commitments took that opportunity away. Instead of stepping into cinematic history, Baker spent years building a respectable but less celebrated career, eventually finding recognition on television with roles like Tiberius in I, Claudius, and Inspector Wexford in the Ruth Rendell Mysteries. In the end, his life feels like a study in near misses and quiet endurance. By the time he passed, his net worth was estimated at around $2 million, a modest reflection of a career that once stood so close to something far greater. Number 10. Michael Billington as Sergei Barsov. Then comes Michael Billington, who played Sergei Barsov, a tragic agent whose brief appearance carried tension, danger, and an emotional undertone that lingered beyond his screen time. He was 36 years old when this role connected him to the Bond legacy, hinting at a future that seemed within reach. This role felt like the beginning of something much bigger. Michael Billington died at the age of 63 on June 3, 2005, after a long battle with cancer. His passing came quietly. Of course, in his final years he had largely stepped away from the spotlight, living a more private and distant life. And that was why we knew his death slowly. His early career had shown real promise. With strong performances in television series like UFO and The Onden Line, he quickly built a reputation as a charismatic and capable leading man. There was a period when his name circulated heavily within the Bond franchise, not as a side character, but as a potential successor to the role itself. And that's where his story takes a painful turn. Billington holds the unfortunate distinction of being one of the most frequently screen-tested actors for James Bond, repeatedly considered, repeatedly rejected. Each test brought him closer to the role, only for it to slip away at the last moment. Even his appearance in the Bond film felt bittersweet, placing him inside a world that never fully opened its doors to him. As time passed, those missed chances seemed to define his career. While he continued acting, the momentum faded, and the industry slowly moved on. By the time of his death, he was largely forgotten by mainstream audiences, his earlier promise overshadowed by what never happened. His net worth was estimated at around $2 million, leaving behind the lingering question of how different his life might have been if just one decision had gone the other way. Number 11. Sidney Tafler, as Liparus Captain. We now come to Sidney Tafler, who played the Liparus Captain, the stern figure in charge of one of the most imposing vessels in the story. He was 61 years old when his role added a quiet but commanding presence to the film's tense atmosphere. This performance carried the weight of decades spent mastering his craft on stage and screen. Sidney Tafler passed away at the age of 63 on November 8, 1979, after battling cancer. His death came just 2 years after the film's release, cutting short any chance of fully experiencing the global recognition it brought. He was laid to rest after a lifetime dedicated to acting, leaving behind his wife Joy Shelton and their 3 children. Long before that final role, Tafler had built a reputation as a deeply respected character actor. From Shakespearean performances at the Old Vic to memorable roles in films like Alfie and the Lavender Hill Mob, his career was rich with variety and depth. Yet despite his undeniable talent, he was often cast in supporting roles, never quite reaching the level of widespread fame his abilities deserved. There's something quietly heartbreaking about how close success seemed, yet how fleeting it became. Just as the Bond film placed him on a global stage, illness began to take hold. The same project that could have introduced him to a new generation instead became one of his final appearances, turning what should have been a late career triumph into a bittersweet farewell. In the end, his story feels like a race against time that he never had the chance to finish. His life's work remained respected, but his moment in the global spotlight came too late. While his exact net worth was never widely publicized, his legacy rests not in numbers, but in the depth and sincerity he brought to every role he played. Number 12. Barbara Bach, as Major Anya Amasova. Then we arrive at Barbara Bach, who played Major Anya Amasova, the intelligent and formidable Soviet agent who stood as Bond's equal rather than his shadow. She was 30 years old when this role elevated her into global recognition, redefining what a Bond girl could be. At that moment, her character carried both strength and elegance, leaving a lasting impression on audiences. As of 2026, Barbara Bach is 78 years old and has long stepped away from acting, choosing a quieter life focused on charity and personal well-being. She now dedicates much of her time to philanthropic work through the Lotus Foundation alongside her husband, legendary Beatles drummer Ringo Starr. After decades in the spotlight, her life today is far removed from the chaos that once surrounded her. But behind the glamour, her journey took a darker turn after the film's success. Fame brought pressure, and she fell into a dangerous cycle of alcohol and drug abuse that slowly began to unravel her life. There were moments when control slipped entirely, and the image of a strong, composed Bond heroine stood in stark contrast to the struggles she faced in private. Everything changed when she met Ringo Starr. Their relationship became a turning point, not just emotionally but physically, as both entered rehab together in 1988. From that moment forward, they rebuilt their lives side by side, choosing sobriety and stability over the destructive path they had once followed. Their bond grew stronger over time, lasting more than 4 decades. Today, her story stands as one of survival and redemption. From the heights of international fame to the depths of personal struggle, she managed to find a way back and build a lasting life rooted in purpose. Combined with her husband, her net worth is estimated to exceed $350 million, a reflection not only of success, but of a life that was once on the brink of collapse and somehow found its way forward again. Number 13. Caroline Monroe as Naomi. Finally, we have Caroline Monroe, who played Naomi, the confident and deadly helicopter pilot serving as the villain's trusted right hand. She was 28 years old when this role brought her striking presence into one of the film's most visually memorable moments. At that stage in her career, her performance made her impossible to ignore even in limited screen time. As of 2026, Caroline Monroe is 77 years old and continues to live a relatively private life while remaining a beloved figure at fan conventions and Comic-Con events. She has stepped away from mainstream acting but still connects with audiences who admire her legacy in cult cinema. Today, she occasionally appears in interviews, special appearances, and niche film projects, embracing her status as an enduring icon of a unique era. Her journey into fame began almost by accident. A simple photo submission led her into modeling, landing her on the covers of major magazines like Vogue at just 17. From there, she transitioned into film, gaining attention through roles in Dracula A.D. 1972 and The Golden Voyage of Sinbad. Her beauty quickly became her defining feature in the industry, opening doors, but also quietly limiting the depth of roles offered to her. That label became both her greatest asset and her biggest obstacle. Caroline was often seen as a sex symbol, and despite her efforts to prove her range, she struggled to break into more serious, emotionally complex roles. She made bold choices to protect her image, famously turning down multiple offers from Playboy that could have brought instant fame but risked typecasting her even further. Instead, she chose a more controlled path, even when it meant fewer opportunities. In the years that followed, she continued working in cult classics like Star Crash and Maniac, building a loyal fan base that never faded. Today, her net worth is estimated at around $1.5 million, a modest figure compared to global stars, but her legacy lives on through a dedicated fan community that still celebrates her decades later. After 48 years, The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977, still lives on through the stories, the faces, and the lives that changed long after the cameras stopped rolling. Some found lasting fame, others faced quiet struggles, and a few left us far too soon. Which cast member's journey surprised you the most after all these years? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more Then and Now 2026 stories you won't want to miss.